Pretty boring start to free agency for the Eagles. They haven't done much. We're pretty bored.
Yeah, so we're just going to talk about our favorite movies.
This is the Eagle Eye podcast presented by Nissan. Reuben, Frank, Dave, Zangaro. A lot has happened. A lot is probably still going to happen. There's a chance something happens while we are recording this podcast, but it's a chance we take because we have to talk to you guys. Like, a lot has happened. There's so much to talk about, and we don't want to wait any longer. We're recording this at 4:30 on Monday. So if something happens at like 6 o'clock and we miss it, we apologize. We will talk about everything that happens at some point.
Yeah, we might end up doing like 3 or 4 podcasts tonight. You never know.
It's very possible. This is off to a pretty hectic start. Even before the negotiation window opened at noon, the Eagles made some news. We'll talk about the Landon Dickerson extension in a little bit. We'll talk about some contracts around the league that have some implications for the Eagles. But, I mean, we have to start with the biggest blockbuster the Eagles have had in quite a while in free agency.
But the big story, the Eagle Eye
Saquon Barkley coming to Philly, a big deal, 3 years, nearly $39 million. Pretty crazy, Rube.
It's crazy in a couple ways because, look, it's a huge move. It's a lot of money, but it's just so out of character. And we talked about this the other day. I liked the idea of doing it, but I just couldn't imagine Howie Roseman giving this kind of money to a running back. And he's done it. It's interesting. I think the other thing we said was this is going to be a different kind of offseason, and I wouldn't be shocked if Howie does kind of break the mold, break from tradition, break from custom, his own methodology, and try something new, because this team was left in shambles at the end of last year. And I think Howie realizes that it's going to take some pretty aggressive moves to change that. And this is one of them. And there's been another one as well, but it's a little risky. I mean, listen, there's a reason running backs don't really get big deals, and they have a limited shelf life. He's had a lot of carries, a lot of touches in his career. He's had an up and down career, and it's up to Howie to kind of figure out Saquon's down years, and last year was one of them. Are they because of, look, he was on a bad team. I think they had one winning season when he was there, and it was the year the Eagles beat him in the playoffs. He won one playoff game in his 6 years. They averaged 6 wins a year. They didn't have good O-lines. He didn't have good people around him. He didn't have a good quarterback most of the time. So you look at Saquon and you say, how does his skill set translate to what we have here, which is a really good O-line, even post-Kelsey, and a winning culture and a very good quarterback, good weapons on the field around you. And we'll see. It's not a sure thing. I guess most free agents aren't, but it's intriguing. It's fascinating. I love it. If he's got the money to do it and they can still address the defense, which they started to do, I can't wait to see him in an Eagles uniform.
Yeah, and you mentioned it's kind of a shift philosophically. It is, obviously, because we haven't seen them give this type of a contract or really put resources into the position to this level in a long time. But I don't think it's a philosophy shift for the sake of philosophy shift. I think it's about the individual player. And that isn't as different, because we've talked before that the right player will make Howie color outside the lines a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good phrase. I like that. Tim McManus uses that one. I like it. Yeah, that's a great point. And I think what Howie, we haven't talked to Howie. I don't know when we will, but he'll say, he's more than a running back. He's a guy who's caught 90 balls in a season. He's a really good blocker. So he's a football player. And you're not just giving this kind of money to a guy that just runs the ball. And there's something to that. Yeah, it's out of character, but it is. If they didn't have the needs they had or they have on defense, and they addressed one of them this afternoon, he would have been at the top of my list. The only reason he wasn't was because of safety and linebacker and edge. So, look, I think everything tells me he's got something left. 2 years ago, he had an incredible season, but I'm not sure. I don't think anybody can be.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Like, I think there's a lot of excitement about him because he's a really exciting player. When he's at his best, I mean, he's a special kind of transcendent player, and the Eagles are clearly banking on him being that. You brought up his pass catching ability. That's a good part of this because I guarantee that's what whenever Howie speaks, he's going to bring up that point. I would say the Eagles in recent years have been very reluctant to throw to the running backs, and that's probably where we might see some Kellen Moore influence. If the offense is going to be different this year, that needs to be a different element because now you have no excuse. If you're not throwing the football to Saquon Barkley, you are not using him to the highest potential he has. So that needs to change. They can't avoid throwing to the running backs anymore. We thought they would do it more with DeAndre Swift, and because they didn't, I don't think they even got the most out of him. I think he had a really good season, and he got paid in Chicago on a 3-year, $24 million deal, which is a nice contract for him. But if you're not going to throw the football to Saquon Barkley, then you should not spend 12 plus mil a year on him.
Couldn't agree more. And he's such a weapon. There were times where I thought he was more of a weapon in the receiving game than as a pure runner. He's made some huge plays as a receiver. When he gets into the open field, when he gets to the second level, forget it. Sometimes the problem with the Giants has been getting to the second level. And I think a lot of that is due to their O-line. So I couldn't agree more. And I was shocked. I thought DeAndre Swift would have 50 catches easy. I just thought it's one of the reasons you bring him in here. And by the end of the year, he was a non-factor. Most of the year he was a non-factor in the receiving game, but he had a really good knack for it. It was just another example of the offense getting stale and predictable. They just stopped doing anything remotely interesting on offense. New season, new start, and it's really exciting to. You take him away from a division rival. He's a local guy from Allentown. Lived in Bethlehem for a while. I'll be asking him how close to the practice fields he lived because I did the math. Like he was a teenager. He was a young teenager when his family moved from Allentown to Bethlehem. So you have to think he went to training camp, right? I can't wait to ask him about that. And it's kind of ironic that he played with Miles, who, DeAndre Swift replaced, and now he's replacing DeAndre. But it's an exciting move. It's an out-of-character move, but it does make sense in a lot of ways. Their biggest needs are on defense, but to add a weapon like that with Devontae and AJ, and you hope Goddard is at that level that we're used to seeing, it's just going to make this offense so much more versatile, multiple, explosive. It's going to help all those guys. It's going to help Jalen. It's going to help AJ. It's going to help Devontae. But yeah, you're right. They've got to use him as a receiver to get that value out of him.
Yeah, and Saquon really is a 3-down back. He can pass protect. Bad news for Kenny Gainwell. They didn't bring in a guy who's going to be out there on first and second down, and then here comes the Kenny Gainwell 3rd down package. Saquon's their guy. You're not paying him this much money to be a split time type of guy. He's going like Gainwell will have some sort of role, you would think, but clearly a backup role, no longer a rotation. It's Saquon's job. And he's going to be fun, man. And once we saw Swift get that $8 million per year deal, Tony Pollard get the $8 million per year deal, I think the range of Saquon's contract came into focus. I'm still a little surprised the Eagles did it. Like, even though there was we knew it was a real possibility. We knew they were in, and there weren't many teams who were also into that level. I wonder if there's part of Howie's like, am I really about to do this?
I'll bet there was. Yeah. We talked about this. I don't know if it was on the pod or off camera, but when there's this much smoke around a move, and Schefter's like, throwing out there before noon, keep an eye on the Eagles and say, it was like it just seemed inevitable by this morning. So when it happened, it wasn't even that much of a shock anymore, just because everything kind of pointed to it happening. And just to put it in perspective, and I've said this before, but the last running back Howie signed to a big deal was Shady in 2012, who was already here. DeMarco Murray got $40 million over 5 years. In 15, that was Chip. Ryan Matthews signed the same day. It was 11 million, I think, over 3 years. So it wasn't a ton of money. Although back then it was significant. But yeah, to find and DeMarco Murray, as you pointed out, he was Offensive Player of the year before. He led the league in rushing in 14, had a huge year. But this feels different than DeMarco Murray. This feels like, they just made one of the bigger free agency moves. And also,
Was it? I don't know. I think that's a little hindsight. At the time, that was a big deal.
It was. But you're getting a guy from within the division. Oh, wait. Maybe you're right. It just seems bigger to me. Maybe it is recency bias. It's one of the bigger free agent moves they've ever made.
Yeah, you and I were talking about some of the big splashes, and it doesn't mean like a big splash does not mean it's going to work. We've talked. The first name that came up in my mind when you asked me for splashes was Nnamdi, because that was a huge one.
Yeah.
But this is right there with those other big ones and I'm not saying it's going to work out well or not work out well. I'm just saying, like, in terms of this, the splash meter is high on this one.
Splash meter, I like that. Yeah, and like, who's the highest on the splash meter? Like the highest, Troy Vincent was huge.
Honestly, Nnamdi might be the biggest one because that was just such a weird offseason because of the lockout. And like that was one, like it seemed like everyone wanted Nnamdi.
You know what's funny about the Troy Vincent? You're right. He had a great year the year before with Oakland. You probably never heard this story, but the day free agency opened, in what year did Troy Vincent get here? 96?
96, I believe.
Yeah. So, we're in the upstairs at the vet. There's a little media room, and right next to our door was the door into the Eagles offices. And it was on the fourth floor of the vet by the old Phillies cafeteria. And you talk about gourmet dining, that Phillies cafeteria, they got it done. So we were all there for a Troy Vincent press conference that day in March of 96. And we're all kind of milling around between the media room and the interview room. And the door opens and we see Troy through the door, and he's standing next to Irving Fryer. And we had no idea Irving was in town, and they both signed, and Troy had brought Irving up and basically told the Eagles, sign him too. No, they were teammates in Miami, obviously both from this area, from the Philly area, Irv from Mount Holly, and Troy went to Pennsbury High School. So that was crazy because we didn't know Irving was, we didn't know he was a possible signing until we saw him through the doorway talking to Troy Vincent. And they ended up both signing that day.
That is good. It's kind of like when DeMarco and Ryan Matthews were in the building at the same time, and the Eagles just signed both of them.
Except Troy and Irv didn't play the same position.
True.
That day was very strange. But yeah, Nnamdi's probably the biggest. Javon Curse was huge. Obviously, that one didn't work out either.
I just realized how big, like how mad people are going to be. They're tuning in to hear our thoughts on Saquon Barkley. We're talking about Nnamdi.
Yeah, well, as far as, splash when it happened, nobody expected Nnamdi to be the player he turned out to be. And the same with Javon Curse. Javon Curse was a big disappointment. But, a lot of these have, Malcolm obviously worked out great. A lot of these guys have.
Yeah, but Malcolm was not a popular one at the time. Everyone wanted Bird.
That's right. Worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
But anyway, as far as running backs go, yeah, it's DeMarco, and then they've drafted really well at the position. When you look at Deuce was drafted in 97, and then Westbrook in 03, and then Shady in 09. Westbrook was 02 or 03.
02 or 03, and that's going to bother the heck out of me, so I'm going to look it up. It was one of those two, right?
Yeah, it was. I'm thinking it was 03, but it could have been 02.
02.
It was 02. Yeah. So, but anyway, they've drafted really. So you had Deuce, Westbrook, and Shady over, from 97 to 2014, and so yeah, almost 20 years of homegrown running backs, really good ones. All three of those guys had multiple 1,000-yard seasons. Deuce has, I think, the third most yards ever by a running back who never made a Pro Bowl. Interesting. But yeah, they haven't had to because they've drafted really well, and it's a position that you I mean you can really miss because these running backs they don't have a ton of great years in them. I was looking at Terrell Davis's career because I was writing about Fletch and
Doesn't T.O. ruin everything? That name now gets in your head. You're like Terrell.
But anyway, I mean, a lot of running backs they have those 2 or 3 great years, and you mentioned Todd Gurley the other day.
Yeah, he's not 30 yet.
He's not 30. He goes from like player of the year to out of the league in 2 years, and that just happens with running back. So it is a risky move. Saquon is what's your gut feeling? How do you think this is going to go for him?
I think he's going to fit well, even if he's not the best running back in the league. Like you could have argued he was at his peak.
Yeah,
I still think he's going to be a very good fit. Now the question is, does he change this offense the way Christian McCaffrey changed the offense in San Francisco? Because Christian McCaffrey, we talked about like that special player that Howie would buck trend for. Christian McCaffrey was that player in 2017. They would have drafted him, and then obviously he goes on and look, there were concerns about McCaffrey when the 49ers landed him. Like, is he durable enough? Can he be out there enough to make an impact? And obviously that answer has been a resounding yes. He's been fantastic. I think it's unfair to compare anyone to Christian McCaffrey right now. But I mean, Saquon, on a talent perspective, like he's super talented. I still think he's very talented. Now, I do worry about the usage, and I worry about the wear and tear that it can have on his body. But yeah, I think he's going to be really good in this offense. And it's we talked about like it being tough to distinguish his drop off versus the Giants line and the offense. I think that's tough to navigate.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think McCaffrey was different because he came in the middle of the season from Carolina, so the impact was like instantaneous, and he really made him a different team. But I do think Saquon can have that kind of impact. And how the Niners use Christian McCaffrey the right way. They throw to him all the time, but he's also a really good runner and has that element of just you don't know how he's gonna hurt you. You just know he is. The interesting thing about Saquon, you said like when he was in his prime, his prime is weird because he had an incredible rookie year. He had over 2,000 scrimmage yards as a rookie, which is unbelievable. I think it was the third most ever. And then, he was up and down. He missed the 1 year. I think it was 2020 with an ACL. And he's had some, not so productive years. And then 2 years ago in 22, he had another huge monster, 1,300 yard, 1,600 scrimmage yards, 1,700 scrimmage yard season. So he's had these 2 monster seasons. And the 4 other years he's been hurt here and there. He's had limited production. So it's not like a lot of these guys, they have those 2 or 3 monster years and then they just kind of start declining. 2 years ago, Saquon was as good as any back in the league. So it's an unusual career. His the ups and downs. And that just reminded me, it's an emotional reunion with James Bradbury. I didn't even think of that piece of it.
They better get in there quick and say hi to him.
Maybe that's why they brought him in and try to, Bradbury looks up to him. Maybe it'll perk him up a little. But I kid, obviously. But one of the more intriguing moves Howie's ever made. I
agree with that. That's all I have on Saquon. Do you have any final words on Saquon before we move on?
No, just I think you're right. I don't think he's going to have I don't think he's going to have monster seasons. He could, but I think he's going to be really good.
I mean, I don't think it's crazy to think about him having a 1,200 yard season.
I mean, that's what Miles Sanders had 2 years ago.
Exactly.
And he's better than Miles Sanders. So at least he was at Penn State. But yeah,
I mean, that would if he does that and he has another
400.
400 receiving. I mean, that's a monster season.
I would agree with that. I think 1,600 scrimmage yards, 10, 11 touchdowns, and you're cooking with gas now.
All right, let's move on.
Around him better. And yeah, and you mentioned his blocking is really, really good. He's gotten really good at that, which is, it's a factor. It matters.
Yeah, he's a really good all-around player.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the other move the Eagles made on Monday. Bryce Huff, and this was like, they made this move, and I'm thinking, well, this is the item here today. This is the big signing, and in actuality, it might be. It's a really important position, the edge rusher spot, and Bryce Huff is a name that they were connected to for a while. I don't think it was a surprise that they went out and made this move. He's an exciting player, but there's also some risk involved with this one too.
Yeah, he's had one big year, and so it's a leap of faith. He was really good last year, 10 sacks, but and look, he took a while. He was an undrafted guy. You give him a lot of credit for. Did you see that Instagram post he posted when he wasn't invited to the combine?
Oh, I didn't.
Before his rookie year, and he apparently posted that day, yeah, don't invite me to the combine. You'll see. I'll prove you all wrong or something. And he's done that. Obviously, I mean, we didn't think both Sweat and Reddick would be here before the move. Now, obviously, at least one of them will be gone, but you're covered when that happens. And yeah, he's an interesting player. I know I'm going to call him Josh Huff several times. He's a different guy, different player. Yeah, if they just added him today, would have been a good day. He's a young guy, and anytime you're signing a 1-year guy, there's a little risk involved.
Yeah, he turns 26 next month. The deal is 3 years, just over $51 million. So we're talking about just around $17 million per season. Right now, which obviously there are a bunch of moves that are gonna happen, around 16th in the NFL in terms of edge rusher. So not a crazy price tag for a guy who played really well last year. And the Eagles obviously think is an ascending player. I think my biggest concern with Huff is not that it's just one season, because he's been like the advanced numbers tell you he's been very effective for the last couple of years. My bigger concern is about the snap percentage, because he hasn't been an every down player. And I know the Eagles are going to rotate, but last year he played 43% of the snaps, which, like, on one hand you could say, all right, well, he had 10 sacks and 43% of the snaps. If you give him 65%, he's going to be even more productive. But that's not the way these things always work. Sometimes it's you're effective because you're playing in a limited role. You can empty the tank, and you're getting in pass rush situations more often than not.
Yeah, that's the thing. I remember writing about Vinny Curry, how he had X number of sacks and only played 40 some odd percent of the snaps. And I wrote, so you just give him just double the snap count, and and he's going to have 18 sacks or whatever. And I didn't write that, but I got a call real soon from somebody who made it clear that was.
I'd like to know that name once we're done this record.
Yeah, and if you're playing on third downs, but again, I mean, if you're getting the sacks, and the Eagles have other guys who can get in there and play, and again, it comes back to how much of a factor is Nolan Smith going to be? How many snaps is he going to be getting? He's got to get snaps next year, assuming. I mean, we'll see what happens with Sweat and Reddick. But if you want to have that rotation, you're going to need more than just Nolan Smith and Huff.
Yeah. This is next gen stats, which I love. Really cool. I love next gen stats. I just wish it was more available and sortable. I would pay for it, NFL. Give me those stats. But anyway, this is the pressure rate leaders from 2023, minimum of 250 pass rushes. He had the highest pressure rate in the NFL, 21.8%, above Micah Parsons, above Josh Allen, above Nick Bonito, above Trey Hendrickson. So, on a per snap basis, he was very, very effective. Now, like I mentioned, a lot of those snaps were in situations where he could just pin his ears back and get after it. But he is fun to watch. I mean, he is. You remember the old Jim Washburn term, the fastballs, and I guess it maybe even predated him. I guess was that a Jim Johnson? Was that Jim Johnson fastballs?
That was Andy Reid.
Andy Reid.
Yeah.
I mean, Bryce Huff is a fastball.
Yeah.
He is fun to watch. Curious to see if he can do it playing a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, the analytics on him are really good. And not just last year, but
in 22 as well.
Yeah, when I think he had 3 sacks that year.
Mm-hmm.
But again, he wasn't playing. He started 7 games in his career.
He didn't start a single game last year. They have edge rushers ahead of him in with the Jets, and they just drafted a kid last year who they think is going to replace him, which is why they let him walk.
Yeah, and the Jets never got anything wrong. We know that. So, I wonder if any position player with 7 starts has ever gotten this much money.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, but I don't know how to look it up. So,
yeah, I wouldn't know how to do that either. But that doesn't really matter.
No, it really doesn't. It's just a meaningless stat that I would like to know, which is pretty much my entire career in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, this we talked about with Sweat and Reddick. Yeah, I mean, obviously at least one of them won't be here. Who do you think it is? I don't really have a strong inclination one way or the other. I guess my only inclination would be Reddick makes more sense in his defense to me. But and now you've added a young edge rusher who's going to be here for a while, so you can afford to keep the older one.
I think it's more likely just because I think Sweat has more trade value, being 3 years younger than Reddick. I think that makes more sense.
What do you think Sweat would bring back?
I'm sorry?
What do you think Sweat would bring back?
Good question. Probably bring you back a 3.
No, I think more than that.
A 3 and a 5, I was going to say. I don't think a 2.
Oh, really? I think a 2.
Yeah, I'd say a 3 and a 5.
If you don't get a 2, I don't know if I'd do it.
I mean, I think teams are going to look at his second half and, how did he go half a season without a sack? Man. And didn't get real close.
I guess.
But he's had 1 year with
talking about a 26-year-old guy who's improved every year until the last half of a ridiculous ending to a season for a team.
Yeah. We'll see. You might be right, but I think a 2's high.
I even think a 2 in sweetener. Like if it's
Josh Sweetener.
No, if it's a because second round is like the top of the second round versus the end of the second round is a pretty big disparity. Like if it's a late second round pick, I'm asking for a day 3 pick on top of it, or at least a day 3 pick swap.
Yeah, I could see that, but people don't like. I mean, you don't see a ton of trades. I mean, for high picks, not a lot of them.
Well, we're going to see that Brian Burns trade eventually, I would think, and that's going to be pretty crazy, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. Maybe you're right. I don't think they'll get a 2. I think if you get a 2 for him, I would do it in New York second.
Yeah, man. I think you're undervaluing what he would bring back. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. That'd be a fun little. If they do trade him, I'm wondering who's closer on this.
Yeah.
But we're in agreement that kind of makes more sense if you're going to trade one of those guys.
I believe so.
For several reasons. Like Reddick has a history of being more productive. I think he probably fits the scheme a little bit better than Sweat. And I think Sweat probably brings you back more in the way of compensation.
Yeah, I agree. But he's, again, Reddick dropped off last year as well. He had the injury the first 3 games. But I feel like Reddick is. I feel like Reddick will, even though he's older. I don't want to say. I mean, I like Sweat as a player, and he's done some good things, but I just feel like he's more of a known quantity, I guess, than Josh.
Oh, I mean, he absolutely is. he rolls out of bed and gets double-digit sacks. I mean, he does it every year.
Every
And I
year.
know he dropped off, but the reason he did it again last year was because he got off to such a hot start.
Yep.
Well, I guess not a hot start, a hot middle, because he got off to a slow start and then he went off.
Yeah. He had that thing on his hand for that wrap for 3 weeks. But yeah, we'll see. It's but whatever happens, at least we know they got one and most likely two proven double-digit edge rushers on the roster.
Yeah. And then we'll see about Nolan. I'm still bullish on him.
Are you?
Yeah, maybe it's leveled off a little bit, but I saw enough last training camp to think there's some juice there.
Yeah, that's going to be a big project for Vic and Wash. Get Nolan Smith going.
All right, let's take a break, and we have a lot more on the other side.
You deserve a car that thrills you, a car that puts goosebumps on your goosebumps. At Nissan, we got everything from turbocharged SUVs to 100% electric vehicles that'll make your heart beat faster. Experience the thrill for yourself and shop your local Nissan store at nissanusa.com today.
Celebrity cook Steve Martorano brings his Italian-American cooking back home to Philly. Enjoy Martorano's Prime at Rivers Casino and Steve's famous meatballs with Sunday gravy, prime steaks, and more. Make reservations at Martorano's Prime on Open Table. Before that negotiating window even opened, Eagles made a move. 4-year extension for Landon Dickerson. This is a move we kind of thought was going to be coming at some point. He was entering the final year of his rookie contract, and he's a really good player.
Yeah. It's a move that you kind of figured was coming and get it out of the way early, and he'll be here for a long time. He's been impressive. There's a very short list of Eagles who've made 2 Pro Bowls in their first 3 seasons, and he's one of them.
Still just 25, will turn 26 for this upcoming season. So young player, certainly a guy they weren't going to let walk out the door. He enjoyed being the highest paid guard in the league for about 2 hours, which
highest paid guard ever for 2 hours.
I know it's always funny. Like all these deals, like, it gets pushed out there as the highest paid whatever in NFL history. And it's like, well, yeah, the salary cap keeps going up. Of course, they're going to these contracts are going to keep getting higher and higher.
Yeah, it's like the world record in the pole vault, the guy from Sweden who grew up in Louisiana, he gets a bonus from his shoe company, from his shoe deal every time he breaks the world record. So he keeps breaking it by like a quarter of an inch to get these bonuses.
Well, I mean, the air's not getting thinner.
It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing.
Lennon's good. And you solidify that left side of the line for at least a couple more years. Mailata's under contract through 25. The Eagles have 2 players now under contract through 28.
How long is Lane signed for?
Not Lane. It's Landon and Jalen Hurts.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Jalen. I still don't think it's insane to suggest that Landon might end up at center. I know you disagree, but
I don't get it.
I know you don't.
Yeah. You drafted Cam Jorgens to play that role.
I understand that.
Nothing from last year changes my mind about that. Landon is a Pro Bowl guard. He plays so well next to the tackle.
Yeah.
They're going to weaken 2 spots. He's 6'6". Jalen's a short quarterback. I get what you're saying. It's not the worst idea in the world because Landon is really smart, and you want a smart guy at center.
Center's just more important than left guard. That's all.
Okay.
And I'm not sold on Cam Jorgens. I think he'll start the season. I think he'll probably be the center next year. I just think at some point in his career, there's a good chance Landon Dickerson plays center for the Eagles.
Right now, he'd be the backup center, so maybe. But the Eagles probably – that's a kind of a funny little underrated need. Should they bring in a backup center?
I think interior line is something. I mean, we'll see what happens with
maybe a guy who has some versatility inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something to think about.
Maybe he can a guy who can compete with Tyler Steen for right guard and then also has some backup center experience.
Yeah, I would say today is a total failure for Howie Roseman because he hasn't brought in interior O-line help.
I didn't say that. I'm just thinking ahead.
No, it's something on the list down a little bit. We know they like Sua.
Who hasn't played center?
Hasn't played center, yeah.
Or
Or
yeah. I'm told they have some interest in bringing back those guys, Sua and Driscoll, but we'll see. There's a chance those guys get paid a little bit. I think anyone who comes from the Eagles' offensive line has a chance to get paid a little bit.
I think Sua more than Driscoll.
Okay.
Driscoll has more positional versatility, but I think Sua's pretty solid.
I'm sorry. This is Landon's day.
This
Sorry.
is Driscoll. Driscoll is yeah, he's kind of up and down. I like Sua, but yeah, I don't want to. Was that? Was that Sean Andrews?
Stacy.
Stacy Andrews. Yeah, Stacy. This is Stacy's day.
It was when Doc left.
Yeah, it was when Doc left. When Doc's, I guess, signed with the Broncos.
Oh, this is Stacy's day.
Anyway.
We were talking about Landon a little bit earlier, joking that he's probably miserable that he became the highest paid guard in the league because he thinks he stinks. We've talked. If you don't get the reference, Landon is notoriously very hard on himself, has kind of a pessimistic view on his play. It helps him get better. That's just the way he needs to look at football. But it is always funny talking. I mean, he's having Pro Bowl seasons and he's like, maybe I'm getting a little better. But
what did that one interview you did with him 2 years ago was just legendary. He's like, I don't even know why they don't cut me.
He was in the middle of a Pro Bowl season in his second year in the league, and he's telling me how awful he is.
Yeah. What do you say? I'm surprised I'm not on the practice squad or something.
Yeah, he's like, I'm quite literally surprised I'm on the team. And I started to chuckle, and he goes, no, really.
He's the best. Yeah, he is miserable, but I like it.
He's like a good curmudgeonly guy to have because it's not like serious all the time. He has a jovial side to him.
A little bit, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a little bit.
At least with his teammates. Maybe not with us.
Yeah, it's interesting. That whole dynamic down there is going to change with Kelsey gone.
Now, this is something I haven't thought about. In the back of the Eagles locker room at the NovaCare complex, they have all the offensive, like the start. There's 5 locker stalls past the door, all the way in the back right corner, past the door to the game room. There are 5 locker stalls. And since Doug Peterson got here in 2016, the Eagles have reserved those 5 spots for the starting 5 offensive linemen from left to right. Does Cam Jurgens have to move one locker stall over? Are they going to make him move all his stuff?
I'm guessing yes.
That's a very funny thing to do. Like, objectively funny to make him move everything in his locker one spot over.
Well, I don't think they keep a lot of stuff in their locker.
Well, he might have to wait a few years for Kelsey to finish cleaning out.
I actually have a photo, and maybe the next podcast I'll show. I took a picture of Kelsey's locker clean out day. He wasn't around. I don't think we saw him at all, or maybe briefly. But I have a picture of his locker.
No, he talked that day because he just, right? He said he wouldn't talk about retirement.
Oh, yeah, you're right. But I took a picture of his locker. I couldn't get all the boxes, the dozens and dozens of boxes of stuff that people send him because he mentions on his podcast that he likes peanut M&Ms, and the next day he gets like 40 boxes of peanut M&Ms. Must be nice.
Does that work?
Let's
try. I like peanut M&Ms.
Well, let's see if you get any.
We'll see. What an experiment this is.
But yeah, I think he'll be in the middle there. Remember when Chip made everybody move their lockers? So like linebackers were next to guards and running backs were next to.
He basically like shuffled it up.
He had Bradford, like the quarterback's always in the front. He had Bradford like in the back of the room.
I get what he was trying to do. Is trying to like make everyone intermingle. Yeah. But there's a reason it makes sense to have the positions together because like the quarterbacks can go over stuff together.
And you see that all the time. You see. I mean, how often do you see two O linemen just going over plays and enter lockers? You see it all the time. So,
and very selfishly, it made it tough for us because if I'm doing a story on the secondary, I have to keep walking all the way back and forth. It's tough.
Yeah, poor Dave had to walk around the locker room.
Well, I mean, sometimes you miss guys because like they'll come in and drop something off and then leave. And if you're in the back of the locker room, you might never see the guy in the front.
Life's rough, Dave.
And then my coverage suffers, and then the fans don't get to read it, and that's what I'm really all about. It's not about me selfishly; it's about me unselfishly trying to put out the best product I can for readers.
So let's move on.
You have anything else on Landon?
No, and Howie doesn't let guys like that go.
Yeah, and I should mention we've also talked about the possibility of a Devontae Smith extension. I think that's still possible. The difference between Devontae and Landon is the Eagles are obviously going to exercise that fifth-year option for Devontae. They have until May 2nd to do that. Obviously, that they're going to do that, and that gives them a little bit more of a buffer. Whereas with Landon, he was going to become a free agent after this upcoming season. With Devontae, they know they have him. Huh?
Yeah, because he was a second-round pick.
Yeah.
Just adding some detail to your excellent analysis.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that while I was still giving it.
Just trying to help the fans. The only reason you're doing this.
Yeah. So Devontae, they're still going to obviously try to lock him out. They don't want to let him leave the building, but a little bit of a buffer.
Yeah, not quite the sense of urgency, and he'll be here. Look, Howie's not going to let Devontae Smith go.
Yeah, he's a cornerstone piece. Those pieces are important. I think he views Landon in a similar way because of the position, but yeah, those guys don't get to walk out the door. Not here.
Right.
All right, let's move on. The Eagles, I can't believe this. We are 41 minutes into this, and they have not done anything. Howie's waiting until we finish this podcast. But some other news around the league. We know the Eagles are looking for a safety. It's a position they desperately need to upgrade. Heck, it's a position they need some bodies to fill the roster. Xavier McKinney gets a huge deal with the Packers, 4 years, $64 million. And since we started this podcast, Geno Stone to the Bengals, inexpensive deal, 2 years, $15 million. I still expect the Eagles to sign a safety in the next day or so.
I liked McKinney, and to be perfectly honest, as excited as I am about Saquon, if I had my pick of one or the other giant, I'd take McKinney just because of the position. He's really good. I mean, he's a really all-around player, really impressive safety, but not complaining about the Saquon signing. Just if it was one or the other, I would go with the safety. But not a ton of safeties, but there's some interesting ones.
I think there's a lot still.
There's a lot of okay ones. We'll see. I mean,
McKinney was going to be the top of the market, and now he set the market.
Yeah, I think Byard set the market.
But hey, Byard's deal wasn't bad.
I know. I was surprised.
Yeah. I guess I didn't have that 2023 tape up in Chicago.
I look, maybe he can give him what. I mean, he got off to a decent start here. Maybe they just looked at the first couple games.
Isn't it crazy that Chicago in back-to-back years has signed an Eagles free agent like right away?
So last year it was TJ Edwards 15 minutes in. This year DeAndre Swift was faster.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was at 12:12 that the news broke that DeAndre Swift was going to Chicago. And
next year they're going to get Albert O at 12:01.
I have a hunch they'll be able to get Albert O before the legal tampering period begins, if they really want him. But yeah, I think Swift. He's a really good back, and if they use him right, then I think he'll do well there. He's still a young guy, and he didn't have a ton of touches in Detroit, so he's I would think he's got a lot left. I would have loved to seen him with the Eagles last year in an offense that was operated more efficiently, more creatively, and more versatility. And we never really saw. We saw moments where he had 1,000 yards and was never really used, the way he could have been. So I think he's a really talented guy, and I wish him well.
Yeah, me too. It was a nice guy to have in the locker room, but I think the Eagles improved that position. They paid to do it, but it's an upgrade.
Yeah, it's an upgrade, I think. I'm pretty sure.
No, it's an upgrade.
We'll see.
Okay.
With running backs, there's no sure things.
No sure things. I'm pretty confident it's an upgrade.
We'll see.
Okay.
I think it's likely an upgrade, but
Give me a percentage that it's an upgrade.
78.
That's too low.
That's what I'm giving you.
Okay. At safety, what do you think they do?
I mean, Saquon's played 6 years in the league and has had 2 years better than Swift's year last year.
Okay.
So just saying.
But Swift never had a year like that until he came to an offense with a really good offensive line. And I think
I like the move. I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying with running backs, you just never know. I mean, guys go from player of the year to out of the league overnight. And we've seen it time and time again, not just with Todd Gurley, but with so many top running backs. So I would never say anything is a lock, no matter who the player is. And I'm sure they would agree with you in Carolina right about now, or agree with me right in Carolina right now. You just never know.
Are we comparing
everything going
Miles to Saquon now?
Miles had everything going for him. He didn't have a ton of carries at Penn State because of Saquon. He averaged over 4.8 yards, I think, every year he was here. He was really consistent. He was never had a ton of carries here. And then, he goes down there and it's a disaster. I think Saquon's a really good addition, and I think he's going to play well. I'm just saying it's not a lock. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. What do you think they do with safety? And by the time you're listening to this, they might have already done something.
I don't know.
CJ?
It's intriguing. I would do it.
Yeah, I think he's CJ Gardner-Johnson we're talking about. Played for the Eagles in 22. Left kind of on not great terms after that season. Ends up taking a 1-year deal in Detroit. Got hurt last year. Didn't get to play a ton. And look, even when the Eagles played him in 22, he was learning the safety spot on the fly a little bit. He was a nickel corner before then. So I think he's still a little raw at safety, but he is a playmaker. And if the Eagles are looking for someone to make plays, he can do that.
Yeah, I agree. And, there's a lot of guys who leave with hard feelings, and money has a way of easing those feelings very quickly. So I wouldn't mind that at all.
Yeah, and the hard feelings were, I think, with the front office, not with his teammates necessarily.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Cam Curl is still out there. He's a guy that I've kind of been in on for a long time. I'd be interested in Cam Curl.
He's a solid guy.
Especially if you can get him on that Geno Stone deal.
Yeah, what was Geno Stone's number?
2 years, $15 million.
Yeah.
If that's right, I mean, I would do that.
Well, usually the reported numbers are too high, not too low.
Yeah.
I would have done that for him.
Yeah, 2 years, $15 million, according to Ian Rappaport.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll see. I think tomorrow's the day for safety.
Yeah, and how would you rank positions in not in terms of like positional value, but in terms of where they have the most need?
I would say linebacker first.
Okay.
I would say safety second.
I think I would say safety first, linebacker second.
Yeah, you could go either way on that. I think they're pretty close. And then I would say corner. I think corner's a need too. Maybe not as immediate as the other two.
Outside or specifically nickel? Because the outside corner market, I mean.
Yeah, but I'm just talking about need. I'm not talking about anything.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The external factors. I'm just talking about pure need.
Sure.
And you have the draft coming up. So
would you prioritize outside or nickel specifically?
No, I mean, that'll take care of itself. They're both needs. I mean, nickel's one position, and it is obviously a big need. But at some point, they've got to find outside corners as well.
Mm-hmm. And look, I think we expect them to do some heavy lifting on defense, but they need that fifth skill position player, whether it's wide receiver 3 or tight end 2. That is a kind of an under the radar need they have in this offseason.
Yeah, I didn't get Gabe Davis, did I? I whiffed on that one.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, Jack Stoll is an unrestricted free agent now. The Eagles didn't tender him, so he is now available to sign with anyone. Could return.
So, yeah, I agree. I think most likely third receiver. is an underrated need. I might put that fourth.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, you would have to because they addressed edge, they addressed running back. They've got a pretty good quarterback. O-line isn't a huge need. You can add something there. They always do. Um, yeah, third wideout is next.
All right, you got anything else? We should probably wrap this up before more
Before
news
the
happens.
next one.
Yeah. All right. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please do us a favor, rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, click that like button, subscribe there as well. Any final words, Rube?
No, he's going to be busy next few days too.
It should be. Take care, everyone. We'll be back with you. We don't have a schedule, but whenever there's news, we will talk about it. This has been Eagle Eye presented by Nissan. For Rube, I'm Dave. We'll talk soon.